welcome. My name is Evgeny Rusakov and you're watching TVP World interview from Vilnius. Even though Kazakhstan is situated 3,500 kilometers away from Europe, this country definitely plays a big role, not only in Central Asia, but around the globe. To discuss the relations between Kazakhstan and Europe, this country's importance and other related questions, we are joined today by the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Roman Vassilenko. Hello, Roman, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Evgeny.
First question, let's start with relations between Kazakhstan and Europe. How do you see that in the next 5-10 years?
Well, thank you for having me. Kazakhstan is actually located partly in Europe. So even though when you say we are 3,500 kilometers away from Europe, we are also part of Europe. And Kazakhstan's territory in Europe is the size of Greece. But,
that's interesting.
But yes, in the 32 years of Kazakhstan's independence and our relations with Europe, we have proceeded and we advanced. And this relations is very strong right now because of the many factors that bring us together, such as common values or the common desire to seek greater prosperity for our people. Kazakhstan has been Europe's largest trading partner in Central Asia. Europe is Kazakhstan's largest trading partner and largest investor. But of course, in the past 2 years, since the start of the war in Ukraine, these relations have gone from strength to strength. And both people in Europe, leaders in Europe and the leaders in Kazakhstan, have really worked hard to make these relations ever stronger. This, I think, is based on the fact that Kazakhstan took a very principled position on the war in Ukraine when President Tokayev stressed that we will respect the UN Charter, including the provision for the territorial integrity of all states, including Ukraine. But this also, I think, proceeds from the fact that both leaders in Europe and leaders in Kazakhstan realize that we need to work ever closer together, and there are some important new avenues for cooperation that bring us ever closer together, such as transport and logistics and the land-based transportation between China and Europe across Kazakhstan, across the Trans-Caspian transportation route.
We'll come back to that, definitely.
Secondly, it's critical raw materials, and it's a new big thing. It's going to be very big for the next 5-10 years at the very least, if not decades. And Kazakhstan has 18 out of 34 critical raw materials that European Union identifies as critical raw materials. And there is already a lot of cooperation in this area. And this will be critical for double transition in Europe, meaning digital and green transition. And of course, the third area of cooperation is green energy and green hydrogen in particular. So in 5-10 years' time, I think Kazakhstan will be much closer to Europe, will be much closer to Kazakhstan, geography permitting.
So first of all, I have to admit that I have to work on my geography knowledge a bit. Sure, because this is some facts were new to me, but anyway. And well, in fact, you partly answered my next question about the importance of Kazakhstan in the region in specific and around the globe in general. So perhaps you could just add something more on this topic.
Yeah, with pleasure. I would focus on the processes that take place in Central Asia, because Kazakhstan is part of Central Asia, and in the past 6-7 years, there have been a lot of progress in relations between the 5 Central Asian states. And there is a greater deal of cooperation between these states and a greater deal of realization of the oneness of the region and of the need for our countries in the region to work together. And Kazakhstan, along with all other countries in Central Asia, really work on advancing this vision for a common, developed, prosperous region. We in Central Asia say that there is no, so to say, clear leader. We're all leaders, or we're going to fail together. But the importance of Kazakhstan, I think, goes beyond geography and what I described in terms of regional cooperation. And that is having to do with Kazakhstan, among other countries, being considered as the middle powers, so to speak. So it's a country of 20 million people. It's the 9th largest country in the world in terms of territory. It's an up-and-coming country in terms of economic development. And it's a country that is not burdened by the great power politics. And yet it is a country that, because of its balanced, pragmatic foreign policy, is able to maintain good and positive relations despite all the circumstances with Russia, with China, and with the West. So because of all these factors, it's a country that can contribute, along with many other countries, like-minded countries, to perhaps strengthening the multilateral system based on the international law that is clearly under a lot of duress and stress in the past decades, but especially in the past 2 years.
But by the way, so we came to my next question. So Kazakhstan has undergone major reforms in the last 2 years, as you already mentioned. So constitutional changes, presidential and parliamentary elections. So could you briefly describe them?
Sure. Well, this whole set of reforms is aimed at one and only goal, and that is to build a just and fair Kazakhstan, where we have a just and fair state, a just and fair economy, and a just and fair society. This is the thrust of all these reforms promoted by President Tokayev. He is a reformer. He came with a reform agenda back in 2019, and I think now we are living in a different country. It's a country that is building a much more fair political system, much more competitive political system, much more fair society where we try not to leave anybody behind. And of course, we fight corruption. We are building an economy where any business opportunity that a person wants to pursue should be available to him or her. And now, about 70% of all the people in Kazakhstan believe that, according to various polls, that the country is moving in the right direction, and I think that's saying something.
Well, that definitely sounds good. So you've already also mentioned before the Trans-Caspian international transport route. So how is it developing right now?
In the past 2 years, the volume of transportation along this route has tripled to 2.7 million tons. Yet the ambition, of course, is for a much larger volume of 10 million tons by 2027. So in just 3-4 years' time.
Well, I have to say that you guys have big plans there.
Yes, and it's not just us. We are doing it together with the Europeans who are engaging with us through the Global Gateway program, but also with the Chinese who are working with us and whom we work with under the Belt and Road Initiative. In fact, for Kazakhstan, these grand projects such as Belt and Road Initiative or Global Gateway are complementary, and they will help break out of this geographical predicament in which we find ourselves, which is being landlocked. Kazakhstan is the largest landlocked country in the world. And there are all other Central Asian countries, they are also landlocked. So we need to break out of the situation by developing as many transportation routes as possible. And that's why we work so well and so hard together with the European Union on the Trans-Caspian corridor. The EU has pledged 10 billion euros for this project, well, grant project, for the development of Trans-Caspian corridor. We just last week launched in Astana the coordination platform with the EU for the development of Trans-Caspian international transport route. And I think that with all this investment, which we are also doing at our own expense, we will reach that goal that I mentioned, and there will be at least 10 million tons of cargo traversing the Caspian Sea in 2027.
Could you just give a hint if Kazakhstan is taking part in any other global projects like this one?
Well, Kazakhstan is located in the very center of Eurasia, and we want to benefit from this location in the heart of Eurasia by recreating the Silk Road.
Okay.
In modern circumstances, in steel and concrete, in roads and railroads. And that is why we're aiming at the development of not just east-west connections, but north-south as well.
Okay. By the way, what do you think about Kazakhstan as a potential mediator or one of the mediators between Russia and Ukraine? Do you think Kazakhstan could play a big role here, and is Kazakhstan ready for that?
Well, first of all, we so wish this war ends as soon as possible. This is our position from the first day of this war, and our president has repeatedly called for the return to the resolution of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine through peaceful means, through diplomacy. We are ready, if asked, to provide any assistance if, again, our help is needed. Recently, by the way, Kazakhstan hosted talks between Armenia and Azerbaijan. So if Russia and Ukraine need our services, we are prepared to offer them. Our president maintains relations with both President Putin and President Zelensky. And we believe that the only solution, frankly speaking, of this war will be through negotiating a peaceful settlement based on the UN Charter.
Okay, there's another big issue, participation of third countries in circumventing anti-Russian sanctions. And unfortunately, Kazakhstan is one of those third countries. I mean, as from what I know, Kazakhstan is really being used just by, I don't know, by businessmen, just in circumventing those sanctions. So what is Kazakhstan doing to prevent that?
Okay. Well, I would say first that Kazakhstan is not participating in the circumvention
Definitely
of
not.
sanctions.
I'm not saying that it is, but it is used.
What happens is that, A, Kazakhstan has not joined this sanction regime, which is imposed by the collective West on Russia. Secondly, at the same time, we do not want our economy to suffer from any impact of sanctions. That is why we are determined to prevent the intentional use of our territory for the circumvention of sanctions. And that's our position, that has been our position since the beginning of the war. And what we are doing is taking measures, administrative measures, bureaucratic measures.
What kind of measures?
To control the movement of goods across our territory. So without introducing these sanctions into the legal regime in Kazakhstan, we are working to prevent the circumvention of sanctions via our territory. There is perhaps some work that remains to be done, but there is already a lot of work that has been done. We do not want to be used for the circumvention of sanctions, and we're doing everything that is possible to achieve that goal.
Russians in Kazakhstan, since the beginning of war in Ukraine, a full-scale invasion, it's been some kind of an issue. Russians here in the Baltic states, and at some point they were just, proclaimed to be the threat to national security. How is the situation in Kazakhstan?
Well, there is, of course, no such thing as a threat to Kazakhstan from ethnic Russians within Kazakhstan. Ethnic Russians are part and parcel of the Kazakhstan's multi-ethnic population. We have 120 ethnic groups in the country. The Russians make up 15% of the population, that's 3 million. They have lived there for centuries, some for decades, like my parents. I myself is a mix of Russian, Ukrainian, and Polish.
Oh, that's interesting.
Blood. So, and there are many, many people like me, I guess, in the world. We are part of the diverse ethnic composition of Kazakhstan. From the very first day of our independence, our top priority has always been to maintain this interethnic peace in such a diverse community. And that's why we for example, promote the study of all languages, not just the state Kazakh language, but also of Russian or Chechen or Azeri, Armenian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, etc., etc. So we will continue to prioritize this interethnic harmony and peace. There is really a strong governmental focus on this promotion of this interethnic community harmony. For example, we have the Assembly of the People of Kazakhstan. That's not a parliament, but that's a quasi-parliament that it brings together leaders from all ethnic groups who resolve, again, questions before they become problems. That's our motto.
So, Roman, thank you for this wonderful conversation and hope to see you in Lithuania once again.
Yes, thank you, and do come to Kazakhstan.
Definitely, definitely. And I would like to remind our viewers that our guest for today was the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Roman Vassilenko. You're watching TVP World. Stay with us.